Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, coming at you a day late and no, I'm not $1 short. I'm actually $1.1 million richer, but we'll get to that in a bit. Of course, I am here with my once a week co-host, the man who props me up when I am in protocols. I actually haven't been in protocols yet, but if I were, I know he'd be right there to rescue me. Jeremy Cohen. Hello, sir.
I would rescue from afar. I wouldn't physically go near you if you were in actual protocols. You're on your own on that one, buddy. But new year, new me. It's the mindset. I don't really know what's really changing, but something's new, I guess.
I was about to say it's the same. I'm the same dirtbag over here. Andrew, new year, you or same guy?
I had no idea you were going to me. I was totally working on something else when you said that.
Well, because last time, we'll get into the episode today, but last time,
let's do it.
I got yelled at because I did not make it explicitly clear at the top of the episode that Andrew was not joining us as the producer in the background.
Because you then consistently referenced like, Andrew, how could you do this on the rundown?
Oh, that's
and
why
I was like not there to respond.
Okay.
And so everybody
to be disingenuous,
like self-serious or self-important to be like, you have to acknowledge when I'm not here, Jonathan. No, it's just for the people listening or the people watching that usually expect a retort from me.
No, I choose to believe you're on a power trip that is just going to get worse. And that's the new year, new you. Power trip Andrew.
Yes. Arrogant Andy. That's
arrogant. That's the title of the episode.
There's the title of the episode.
Okay. We're off to a rousing start here in 2022. Okay, let's get right into it. So we actually do have some news that came down on Monday. We're going to get to that in a bit, but let's first talk about the on the court stuff. Which was again, it's so funny. I don't know if funny is the right word, but like, okay, we had a 2-2 week, right? This team has been terrible all year. Not terrible. They've been not great all year. They had a week in which they won as many games as they lost. They've been down players. They haven't had their whole team for any of these 4 games. And yet we're going to sit here and I have a feeling the mood's going to be a little dour. Is it not, Jeremy Cohen?
I would say so. The funny thing about this week is that if you had just gauged the reactions and responses of people online, you would have thought the Knicks went 0-4, but they didn't. They went 2-2. And it just goes to show, we'll obviously get more into this, but this season continues to roll along merrily, and it's not been fun. But this week I felt like was the least fun week. And even though the Knicks had a 500 week, which is better than we can say for, most of the last however many weeks that we've been recording. I mean, I want to say since October, maybe there's been 1 week where the Knicks were better. And it was last week when they went 2-1.
Yeah. I mean, we've had we've talked about this before. We've had 2, maybe 3, definitely happy weeks. Like the first week was pretty happy. And then, the first week was
even soured because of the Orlando game.
The re-recording, right? Isn't that what we recorded?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm so happy you said that because I was going to save it for a little bit later, but I'll just say it briefly now. And then we'll get into the Julius Randle of it all. So the Knicks, they beat the Timberwolves, played like crap. They beat the Pistons, really played like crap. The subs finished the game and came back to win it. And then some notable people were missing, and they lost to the Thunder and the Raptors. I'm happy you talked about how this was just such not a fun week. And the reason I want to emphasize that up top before we get into anything else is, I don't know about you, I was so excited for the Thunder game. And even after the Thunder game, when they took 1 million threes and they made 4 of them, I was still kind of really excited for the Raptors game, even though I was kind of already ready for a loss there because the Raptors were pretty good. And obviously we were down Mitch. And I was just the first, I tweeted something out to the effect of boy, this has been the most fun 3 minutes to start a game this year, to start the Thunder game when they were, I think, up 12-3. And then from that point forward, there was nothing enjoyable, even though we were getting to watch the players that we've enjoyed watching the most all year. And you could draw a lot of conclusions from that. Guys are in roles for a reason. And once they start to step out of those roles, some flaws get exposed and this, that, and the other thing. And we'll get into some of that stuff. But just yeah, without even getting into the X's and O's, it was a bummer of a week.
It was. And, when people say play the kids, I don't know if that's necessarily what they mean, because of course we want to see some sort of veteran presence. But for those who are of the mindset, like, no, just give the kids a lot of minutes. And if they develop and they win, great. They develop and lose, then it's whatever, because it's lottery odds. I think the romanticism of playing the kids doesn't really show up until they start losing, right? Like, it's a sort of thing where it's great to see these young players, and Quentin Grimes is getting 31 minutes and Obi Toppin is getting 40 minutes. And we're seeing all these, great combinations and young guys getting the minutes that we so crave. And then they play. And then it's like, I don't really want to sit through many more games like this, because it's ugly. And granted, you want healthy players to come back, and it was a nightmare.
Can I take it a step further?
Hodgepodge of a nightmare.
I'm going to take it one step further. You can't convince me. And again, there's a part of me that thinks that they would be better off making certain moves between now and 37 days from now that would potentially improve their draft position. I think there is a logic to that. I'm not sure if I'm here for it yet, but I think there is a sound logic to that. And yet you can't convince me that if the rest of the season were essentially games like that even though those kids are playing, that the quality of development that would be going on would be on par with what we saw last year, and the growth that was experienced last year from Emmanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, and RJ Barrett, who every second they stepped on the floor was a high stakes second. And there was no, we're probably gonna lose this one tonight, so let's just, it's like that didn't exist. It was all high stakes. And I think the way to tank, if we're gonna call it that, we saw it like firsthand. You could even argue with the Raptors game, but definitely with the Thunder game. Like, Oklahoma City's, they are going to figure out a way to finish with a bottom 3 record. Maybe bottom 4, but probably bottom 3. And yet, every time they step foot on the court, they're like, we have our leader. Well, unless Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is on the sidelines, but like, we have a guy that tonight he gives us a chance to win. And this is mostly going to be about Julius Randle, but if we're like, coming right out with it, the Knicks don't have that guy. Like, I know RJ Barrett kind of tried to be that guy, and I don't know if you want to, how much we need to get into that. He's not that guy. At least not yet he is.
I actually have an entire rant bottled up and pretty ready to go. And that actually unlocked it, because I was going to save it for another time. I was thinking about detention.
No, we can get through the other stuff quick. It's fine.
So every day, several times a day, I log on to Twitter. And that's your
first fucking mistake.
Of course it is. But I do it because, you have to keep up to it a certain extent. And I feel like Troy Barnes from Community walking into the apartment with pizza and the entire room's on fire and people are fighting. And it's all about agendas consistently. Wow. It's all about agendas where it's Tom Thibodeau, Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett. I mean, you name the player, there's a side for it. It's a civil war of some sort, right? And I feel like,
can I be
there
Cap?
Are all these, what can you be?
Can I be Cap?
Sure, you can be Cap. And it feels like people are fighting on this thing, and whatever, it's Twitter. You can do what you want. You don't have to be necessarily rational, but there are then kind of like data points that are used and completely misconstrued. Like, this is what a Julius Randle-less team looks like. No, this is what a Julius Randle team looks like without Derrick Rose, Kemba Walker, a hobbled Evan Fournier, maybe Mitchell Robinson out, Nerlens Noel missed. Like, there are a bunch of guys who are not playing. And so I think the mindset of like, hey, just curious what it looks like without Julius, and you did a great job breaking it down in your newsletter, John, is, well, what if the team were whole outside of Julius, right? What would that start to seem like? Because then you get something like what Tibbs said with the whole backup quarterback analogy that some people took negatively. And I'm just sitting there thinking like, well, I don't mean to compare Brett Favre to Julius Randle and Aaron Rodgers to Obi Toppin, but Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen, and he sat behind Brett Favre for 3 whole years and didn't really play.
Can I jump in real quick? there was a period of time towards the end of Brett Favre's career, and I'm not comparing Julius Randle now to the end of Brett Favre's career, where Brett Favre was a fairly atrocious quarterback, throwing up anything for grabs, but there's still carried with him the reputation of a guy who A, was good, and B, well, if he's in there, we could win the game. And I want to be very clear. The Knicks, in no way, shape, or form, as currently constructed, are a better team without last year's version of Julius Randle or anything approximating last year's version of Julius Randle on it. I just want to make that very clear before you continue.
100%. And what you said that kind of got me to say, screw it, I'm going to say it now, is it's not a Tom Thibodeau problem. It's not a Julius Randle problem. It's all these other guys. Those are problems, right? They are 100% problems. The biggest problem is that the Knicks do not have the talent necessary to compete. And if Julius
Say it louder
Randle,
for those.
If Julius Randle is not playing like a top 25, top even 30 player, then
I mean, he was a top 15, top 20 guy last year. Yes.
Right. But if he's not playing up to even 75% of what he was last year, which I don't think is asking for a ton, then the Knicks are just sunk no matter what, right? Because they have all of these guys who individually can work, but when you put them together, it's not clicking whatsoever. And I don't regret for a second having last season, right? Because last season, with the context of everything going on in the real world, was a joy for me. Yeah. We can talk about like, oh, the Knicks should have tanked. Look, if Quentin Grimes becomes a really good player and the Knicks were the 4th seed and made the playoffs and won a playoff game, sure, it'd be nice if they'd done more. But if they just do that and were rewarded with Grimes and Jakubaitis and with McBride, then I think that's a pretty damn good season. But I digress. The point here is the one time where I feel like we get too, I don't want to say resentful, but when I see the expectations, right, of a season and how good the Knicks were last year, and success has to be linear. So how come the Knicks aren't doing well when reality says that if the Knicks maybe had they're 17-20, if they have 2 games that don't go awry at the end and they become wins, then the Knicks are 19-18. They're sitting above 500. We're not freaking out as much. And I think we've become so spoiled by what was just a fluke year in so many ways that it has completely changed our mindset, right? Like this past week, the Knicks won ugly games. They were hideous. Yes. And I think there's absolutely things worth critiquing. But at the end of the day, the thing that matters to me, considering how the Knicks need to win and are trying to win games, is that they won. And yet you go back, right? Because God forbid you just say like, oh, there's a nice win. Here's what the Knicks need to work on. You go back a month ago when the Knicks when they lost to the Nets, when they lost to the Bulls, and you had Alec Burks starting at point guard. And the Knicks didn't do well in the result, but the process was good. And what was the main thing that rose to the top? It was, no, we're way too far for silver linings. There's no morals here. There are wins and there are losses. And I just think to myself, like, how the fuck are we so spoiled that we can just scoff at wins and be like, oh, every win has to be a good win? They're not all going to be good wins. They're not all going to be good losses. You take what you can get. And the grand context of everything we're seeing this year is that it's been bad, right? It's not been fun. We can admit that. Yeah. But the whole point with everything is like, we're looking at a team that Vegas thinks is 500, that probably is or should be around 500 if the team gets its act together and makes does this. It doesn't matter. The point is they're hovering around this spot, right? And when you look at everything going on, and it's like, well, okay, I mean, they're going to win games, they're going to lose games, but they're not all going to be this decisive, pure, phenomenal wins. They're going to be some ugly ones out there, and we can just accept them and say, great, now let's work on it and get it done. And that's what I don't want to lambaste Twitter or any of this, because I feel as though we have gone into, and I say this collectively, we have gone in with this mindset that the Knicks are a superior team and they should be so much better than all these other teams. And we don't consider the fact that, like, okay, well, the teams above the Knicks all have guys who are playing at high levels. And when you look at the fact that when the pandemic started, right, the Knicks were the 6th worst team in the NBA that year. And that basket that, Vince Carter, it didn't matter, but that game would have been a deciding factor between where the Knicks fell and didn't. They landed with the 8th pick. But before they got the 8th pick, their team was essentially Julius Randle after a horrid season, RJ Barrett after a very short and mixed rookie campaign.
It was a hard
Mitchell Robinson in his second year, And that's pretty much it, right? They had all these guys that they were going to non-guarantee, Wayne Ellington. They brought back Reggie Bullock. They were a shell of themselves. And then you look at the fact that right now, since then, what have they done, right? They have gotten Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickley and Quentin Grimes, and they drafted Deuce McBride, who can hopefully be a rotation piece, and Jakubaitis, who's doing very well in Europe. And they have signed Alec Burks, and they have traded and re-signed Derrick Rose. They also re-signed Alec Burks as well. And we have been suffering as Knicks fans for such a long time that I think we forget how long it does take to start to build something from the ground up the right way. And it's been 2 years. It's not even, right? I mean, that was not even 2 years ago.
It was been less than 2 years. It's been like a year and a half.
Ago. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when I look at that and I consider, okay, well, it's taking this much time. There's a reason why. Because the Knicks, as constructed, don't have that star talent they need. And if they do, if that's, the young talent, they need time to mature. And they're not matured yet. It's going to take time. And that's why I can't freak out about this year, because it's like, again, there are so many safety nets in place. I would love to see the Knicks make upgrades, but if they keep sliding, then maybe it's not even tank. Maybe it's just, the classic Yankee way of Brian Cashman being like, well, we're not going to go for it at the deadline because we got Severino coming back and this other, they could do the same thing with Derrick Rose. I guess the whole point of this rambling rant.
It's not rambling. It's all coherent.
Well, thank you. Because I've been trying to rehearse some of it in my mind, at least, and it's all coming together now. It's just that I think we really need to reevaluate where we stand as a franchise, as fans, considering the process. There are tons of things that can go right or wrong that need to be worked on 100%. But at the end of the day, until you get talent in the building, it doesn't matter. And that's the thing. It's like in my mind, it starts with Tibbs and Julius. We can argue one or two, whatever it needs to be. But in my mind, it's Julius first, because he's the guy who needs to, he's on the court. He's the one who was the All-NBA player last year who needs to get right. And then it's Tibbs who needs to be responsible for corralling him and tightening a leash, or at least putting a leash on, to make sure that he can actually get right. Because when Julius isn't right, it's a mess. And this is why the idea of trading Julius for nothing in return, really, it doesn't work for me, because then you see a product more similar to what we saw in the latter half of this week.
Well said. First of all, you're not nuts at all. I solicited questions today for the newsletter for mailbag questions. And I had a question that was, if Tibbs does not win 40 games this year, should he be fired? I mean, this is where the mindset of some people are. I
understand. Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, you're looking at things you're kind of removing emotion out of it. And I think we're conveniently in the defense of people who are very upset. And look, you're not happy watching this shit. I'm not. No. Nobody's happy watching this shit. But in terms of zooming out and looking at the process, we are kind of conveniently forgetting the fact that in New York, at least, there was a lot of hype from the offseason. Well, if Kemba's Kemba, and if that, and certain media people like, well, maybe this team could, sniff high 40s or whatever. Then we had the preseason, in which they looked really good. Then we had the 5-1 start. So that's all been as a backdrop, which is why I think we're getting a lot of what we're getting. That's number two. Number three, and you nailed it with Julius Randle. He went from a guy who we were sitting here and having regular debates, whatever it was, a year ago, about, well, if you could trade Julius Randle just to unload his salary, is that a smart move? And I would go back and forth myself. You were pretty consistent, like, no, I think you hang on to him. But even like, it's not like you were saying that with all kinds of conviction. You were just like, well, right?
It was more like, get him onto this so-called max deal that you can get with up to 117 million. But
no, I'm talking about before last season.
Before that?
Yeah.
No, I was more like, let's see how it plays out.
Let's see how exactly.
Right.
He went from a guy who was essentially maybe a neutral asset, if that, on a $19 million or 2 years, 20 or 40 left, to, as you said, an all NBA level player. And a number of people have pushed back on this notion of mentioning the all NBA part of his season as like, well, it's really disingenuous to mention that, because we should have realized at the time that he was not a top 10 NBA player. as you pointed out, this wasn't about him being a top 10 player. I actually even argued last season that I thought he had an argument for being top 5 MVP. Putting that aside, it was about, this is a guy that you can rely on. This is a guy that you could go into any game, and if he's there, you can revolve other things around him. And they made decisions this off. Say what you want about the decisions they made. Pretty much every decision they made this offseason was in some way, shape, or form connected to the fact of, we believe in this guy and we are going to help him be the best version of himself. Mm-hmm. That, whether it is Julius Randle's fault or it is Tom Thibodeau's fault or it is nobody's fault, and it is just what happens sometimes when the shots don't go down, that is what has gone awry. Is that thing that they thought they would be able to rely on is not a thing that they could rely on. And then everything else is a trickle down effect. And then that's, why we're here when we had this week where Julius Randle, went from showing signs of life, right, in the Christmas game, to having arguably the 2 worst back-to-back performances of his Knicks, maybe not of his Knicks career, because there were some.
They're up there.
They're up there in the Wolves game and then the Pistons game, and then I got on here on the live stream after it was announced that he was in protocol. It was like I said, like, look, I'm not rooting for the guy to get. I'm not happy he's sick. I'm not like rooting for anything bad, but I'm very curious to see what transpires. And then, by the way, in between that and the first game, Kemba Walker turned his ankle in warmups, and we didn't get a Kemba Walker led. What's that?
Fournier, his ankle, and then Kemba's knee.
Sorry.
Yep.
Fournier's ankle, Kemba's knee. But I want to focus on Kemba because instead of getting a guy leading your team who was several days removed from winning Player of the Week award for his conference, they had a rookie leading the attack. And look, we all love Deuce McBride here at Knicks Film School, but like Kemba Walker, Deuce McBride. So I'm not. And then the last 2 games, and now we're sitting here with like the figuring out life. Like, where do we want to go forward as Knicks fans? What are we rooting for? What are we not rooting for? It's complicated. And people, I think, to your point about the narratives part of it all is people do try to make it a little bit overly simplistic in some aspects. And the reality of the stuff is like, it's complicated. It's complicated. And guess what? The last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it back to you. It's not just complicated for the Knicks. It's complicated for like 20 NBA teams. Like, there's the 4 or 5 teams at the bottom who there's like, it's nothing complicated because they suck. Everybody knows they suck. There's nothing they could do to not suck. And they're just going to keep sucking. And then there's how many teams? Maybe more than 5. There's the 3 teams in the West. Chicago's got it pretty well figured out. Brooklyn will give them the benefit of the doubt. Milwaukee, they've got it figured out. Cleveland's doing pretty well for themselves. So there's like maybe 6, 7, 8 teams that it's like, okay, things are really going well for those teams. And then there's the other 18 teams in the sport. And some of those teams are doing better than others. And the Knicks are certainly on the bottom half of that spectrum. But like, most fan bases have these sorts of conversations and are sorts of frustrations. I think we think it's like, oh, Tom Thibodeau's the worst coach of the NBA, or Julius Randle's been pretty bad, but like, everybody has issues with their star and like this, that, and the other thing. So yeah, that's where we are.
I think the one key thing is, it was interesting to hear Tibbs talk about a lack of effort for that Raptors game, because the thing is that pretty much everyone on the Knicks outside of Quentin Grimes and Deuce McBride had experience playing in front of next to no fans. I say next to no fans because there were some family members and close friends.
It's an empty arena.
Right. Yeah. So it's not, I can understand if, that was super weird and now it's normal, but now it's weird again, whatever it is. That to me shows a deeper problem than just Julius Randle. I think what's so frustrating as a fan to watch this is that we give our time and our energy to watching a team that we want to see play hard, right? And the team's not going to care about us. Like, at the end of the day, the players on that squad aren't going to care. that you, John, or that I or Andrew or anyone listening exists. But collectively, you would hope that they do. And it feels like a slap in the face when the team doesn't perform up to task to at least show their effort, right? Like if the Knicks were losing, but trying really hard, you could respect it. But right now, when you see guys, like when Randle, as Wally Zerbiak was talking about, like dying on screens where he refuses to play as hard as you feel like he should be out there, it feels like a slap in the face. And it feels like you are not being respected because you put a lot into this. And sure, they put more into it because it's their jobs and their livelihoods, but you want to see something that is redeeming coming back to you. And when I watched the team this past week, there was nothing redeeming outside of the fact that they managed to get 2 wins. But I do think that something worth noting is that for 2 of those games, they were against Minnesota and Detroit. They were the wins. And we could talk about like, oh, well, the Knicks, need to be better than those teams. And sure, on paper, they absolutely do. But I think we are also forgetting the fact that the guys in Minnesota, the guys in Detroit, the ones who are healthy, they're fighting for their careers. Like that's what I was talking about last week with the whole, like the Knicks players individually, for the most part, are comfortable. The only guy who really needs to get paid this year is Mitchell Robinson, assuming he's still on the team. And then after that, it's maybe an RJ Barrett extension, but he's got more time than that to figure it out. Greg Monroe is out of the league for over 2 years. He's fighting for his NBA career. Of course, he's going to play hard against the Boston Celtics. And the next night, they're going to try to do everything they can. They're going to use that time. It's on the Knicks to then recognize that and say, well, like if they're going to be fighting because everything is on the line for them, then we need to fight back with the same energy. And they didn't. And it's like, I have a bigger problem with them playing down to the competition, but we also don't ever respect the competition. We as fans never say like, oh, they played great. It's always, we played terribly. And that bothers me because it's like, well, no, they are fighting for a reason. Yes, but I think to play better. But again, you can't underestimate other teams. Other teams are capable of playing well. Like that Wizards game, the Knicks played terrible defense. The Wizards made shots in the fourth quarter. They were great offensively. It doesn't just have to mean that one team shat the bed. It can mean the other team did well. And the same thing works in reverse. So when I see, and again, when the Knicks play the Thunder, it's like, well, the Knicks have $62 million in players basically missing or something like that, right? The Thunder don't pay their players anything. Their highest paid players on the Knicks in Kemba Walker. And then you look the next night and it's the Raptors who are finally fully healthy for like the first time since game 1 of the regular season.
Yeah.
And
they're a good team.
They're great. And it's just,
well, no, I think it's frustrating to a lot of people because the Knicks collectively, this may not, I don't know if this is actually true, but it felt at times like we were getting a team last season that played like their collective careers were on the line, and I think if you go back and you actually like watch the tape, like, yeah, you're going to find plays where Julius Randle was dogging it last season. Right. Except they weren't exposed as much because he was insulated better than he has been this year. And like, I could push back and be like, well, they it's not like they were dogging it against the Raptors or dogging it against the Thunder. But at the same time, there was a collective spirit that was missing for those games, just like there was a collective spirit that's been missing for large segments of lots of games this season. And I think that's where the frustration is rooted. And that is where it gets back to Thibodeau, because Thibodeau won Coach of the Year last year because he, again, took a team that was picked to win 20 and a half games and he led them to 41 wins. Largely because we were the team that had other fans complaining about their teams after they played us, as opposed to recognizing like, hey, the Knicks came out and they played really hard and they did everything they needed to do. They didn't beat themselves and they won the game. This year, it hasn't been like that. We've been, as I just referenced a moment ago, we've been just another team. And when you're just another team in terms of your effort level, again, not like, Sacramento Kings this season, like effort level, or not like Knicks teams past effort level, but like not crazy high effort level, then it's going to often come down to talent. And this gets back to the very first thing you just said on your rant, which is that the Knicks have less talent than, I don't know how many teams you want to count, 20 teams in the league, 21, 19, 18, something in that vicinity. And guess what? Guess what the Knicks are rated in net rating? They're 22nd. So, there you go. So we'll bring it back before we give out game balls and go with the news, then game balls. They went 5-4 in the first 9 of these games where we've been talking about this for the last few weeks, where there's this 18 game stretch they really need to take advantage of. They're 5-4 in the first 9 games. Like, are we sitting here being like, they have to go 6-3, 7-2? Like, I don't know. I'm looking at these. So just to get ahead of ourselves, we're not going to do predictions yet, but just so we're all on the same page. Here are the Knicks' next 9 opponents. All right. The last 9, by the way, I think looking back, there was probably a little bit more damage they could have done. Here are the next 9. Indiana at home, as you're listening to this, that'll be tonight. Then home and home against Boston. Who's been playing better, but may not have Jason Tatum. San Antonio, who's been pretty good, although they've been without DeJounte Murray, although I think DeJounte Murray is going to be back for that. Dallas has Luka back. At Atlanta has they talk about a team that's healthy for the first time. And then 4 straight home games: Charlotte, Minnesota, New Orleans, Clippers. Now, we originally identified that being the end of this 18-game stretch where they needed to clean up. Looking at those 9 games, like, I'm not sure that there's one game in there where I'm like, oh, good, we get to play Team X. We're definitely getting a win there. So I don't even know if I'm approaching this like, I don't even know how I'm approaching this. I'm kind of approaching this like, look, at this point, whatever fucking happens. Whatever's going to become of this season is going to become of it, and what's meant to be will be.
It's 100% anything goes. And at my heart, I am an optimist. I think it's just a better way to live my life. But if I'm being realistic, when Julius went out, my first thought was like, okay, well, I hope he's okay. My second thought was, I'm really curious how the team looks. And my third thought was when they lost to the Thunder, thinking this honestly might be the season. And again, I don't mean to sound so cynical. It's just when you talk about what, the games you just laid out, where they're not easy games, where it's a different kind of losing that you have without Julius Randle versus with him. One is clunky. The other feels like, do we have a prayer right now when everyone else is out, when you're missing, the engines of the fact that you talked about with Deuce earlier, I would have started Emmanuel quickly. I don't really understand separating Quick and Obi if you're going to talk about the connection that the two have. I understand the need for dribble penetration that you get from Deuce, but I think Tibbs also realized a little bit more of maybe I should try it differently when in the start of the second half, he had Quickly and then he brought Deuce in. Benched him first.
That was garbage time.
Right.
Yeah.
But even still, like I am concerned about what that means. And the fact is that the Knicks really aren't that far away from having really good lottery odds. And I'm still at the point where I am rooting for the Knicks to make the playoffs because I think that you can make more noise. And I don't mean that I recognize that I just ranted about the fact that the Knicks don't have talent. And now I'm advocating for them to have a lower success in terms of the draft and the odds of picking a great player. But I do think as well that we did try the whole tanking thing and we didn't have the right infrastructure in place in terms of drafting and developing. So it's very different this time, but it's still kind of like you want to stay relevant. You want it to feel like last year wasn't a complete fluke and that maybe you can, make something interesting. And then it's like, okay, cool. The Knicks are still competitive enough, but at the same time, I'm okay with the idea of the Knicks not making the playoffs. It's not my preference, but I would be fine with it. And honestly, if we talk about the Julius Randle contract, if he doesn't get right, his contract is affected with the likely bonus not converting if the Knicks don't make the playoffs. So again, I'm not saying that as a reason for people to then be like, oh, well, now I'm really interested in the Knicks not making the playoffs because it's like $1.8 million, guys. It's not a huge difference, but it's still something. Regardless, I'd rather pay that bonus and make the playoffs than the other way around as missing the playoffs and not paying for that bonus. So, but with all of that being said, it's then like, well, what happens, right? If 3 weeks from now, we've gone through this slate of games and I said that 10-6 of the 16 games or whatever it was like, that gets you to 500. You're in a better spot. 8-8 gets you 4 games under 500. 7-9, 6 games, or 5. The point being is that the Thunder game, I don't want to say a must win because it's one game of an 82 game season in the end of December, but it's one of those games where you look back on, it's like, it's that one. It's a Magic game. It's any of the other games that
there's been a few
that have slipped away.
Yeah.
And then you think, you know what? So be it. If that's the way the season goes, you got safety nets in place, you have protocols, you're fine. You can manage and you can tinker in the offseason and you can build a better product. But as things stand right now, it's hard for me to feel super optimistic about the way things are going because things just aren't going very well.
So we're not going to do the whole, what could they get for Alec Burks, Derrick Rose thing. We're not going to do that yet. I do think prescient for right now is the notion of Kemba Walker. And like, again, he's missed 2 games. They're supposedly going to get tests back today, according to something, Mike Breen said on the broadcast. They are rumored to be signing they actually officially signed Ryan Arcidiacono, who is he's an energy point guard has been in Chicago the last 4 years. It's just an interesting move that, and Shams reported that is probably going to be converted eventually to a full season deal, which now they have an open roster spot. We'll get to that in a second. It's interesting that they made a signing at the point guard position, especially that they have Deuce, have Quickly, the whole thing. Does that portend something for Kemba? We don't know. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he's played his last game as a Knick. We don't know. And then there's the Julius Randle of it all, which I know February 3rd isn't circled on anybody's calendar. But I did think this week in some post games, there were a couple of just, interesting fake trades that came up. I'm curious to what you think of both of these. So one we had from Aaron Roy, which was Patrick Williams and Derrick Jones Jr. for salary purposes from Chicago for Julius Randle. Now, before I say anything, Andrew, get your drink ready. On the Low Post podcast this week, he talked about the Jeremy Grant sweepstakes that may or may not be developing ahead of the trade deadline, because he is probably going to be like the quote unquote best player made available ahead of the deadline, because obviously the Pistons aren't going anywhere and, whatever. And an idea that was pitched was like, well, would the Bulls give up Patrick Williams, who was the 4th pick in the draft about a year ago, who's out for the year also because of an injury he suffered against the Knicks? Would they give him up for Jeremy Grant? Julius Randle, in a vacuum, even with the struggles he's had, is a better player than Jeremy Grant. But I wonder, with the way the Bulls are built and the fact that they already have one isolation. Well, no, I can't even call either of them isolation scorers, because they're both. DeRozan's a really good passer, and LaVine can pass. I almost don't know. Would they rather have Jeremy Grant than Julius Randle? I kind of think they might. Would you do that trade? I should ask.
If I'm the Knicks, then I certainly consider it. But it's the thing where I don't even see why the Bulls would do it. The only reason I don't think the Bulls they would do it is if they turn Julius Randle into the Thad Young of last year, right? A backup big who can facilitate really well and do things. But that's also not necessarily what Julius Randle might be best at. I'm sure Julius Randle against second units would dominate. But at the same time, if I am Chicago, I probably don't do it, because yes, is it basically saying right now, Derrick Jones Jr. for Randle? Sure. But Randle also has just not looked good. And I don't think we're at the point where we can say that we can sell high on him as a player. I don't even think we could say we could sell high on Jeremy Grant, because he's been injured all year. He's a good player as well, but it's okay, would you rather be bad or would you rather be injured? At least with the injury, you can blame it on something. With being bad, you hope you turn it around. I just don't see Chicago going for that.
I don't think they would either. I'd run to the fax machine to fax that one into the,
which is exactly why Chicago wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it feels like one too many cooks in the kitchen for the Bulls. The other one, this is from Jason M. Could the Knicks be back in the Collin Sexton sweepstakes? Again, Sexton also out for the year. And his notion, or his thought was, could they give, I don't know if he named a specific player, but I guess it was maybe it was something like, I don't know. I could see Alec Burks would work for salary purposes. Like Burks and maybe like the Charlotte pick or something for Sexton. I could see maybe that being fair value for a play. So what you'd be getting is essentially the restricted free agency rights for Collin Sexton, who's a player that we think there was legitimate interest of the Knicks in the past. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. And if I was Cleveland, I mean, I don't know what, but to me, if Cleveland's doing that deal, it's because they lack any confidence that they have a chance of signing Sexton to a fair deal in this offseason. And what's a fair deal for him? I don't know, 5 for 80, 4 for 64, something like that. I don't even know. But
it's a hard pass for me. The reason I say that is just because this was supposed to be the year we were supposed to see what Sexton could do, and he's injured. Yeah. And you're going in blind by hoping that the idea of what Sexton can be is far better than what Sexton really is. And we don't fully know what an unleashed fourth year or future Collin Sexton is. Could be a good player, but I would rather take the chance of trying to sign and trade for him in the offseason than I would by trading Alec Burks and maybe a first round pick for a player who, number one, can't play for my team. And number two, I don't fully know what he's going to look like when he's fully healthy. Like if we're talking about Arcidiacono, personally, if he's signed to a full year deal, then I would hope that he is the first of 2 Villanova point guards who is on this team, with the other one being Jalen Brunson in this case. Like he is putting together a far better campaign than someone like Collin Sexton. He who is an unrestricted free agent who you only have to figure out sign and trade. You don't have to worry about, base year compensation and how do we influence Chicago, Cleveland, or in this case, Dallas. Like you just remove a lot of the restrictions. You don't have to pay a ridiculous amount to get that player away moving forward. So I'm just not really interested in Sexton at this moment.
I don't know if it's a hard pass for me, but I have the same trepidation that I did over the summer, which is like, I'm really not interested in paying Sexton's next contract based on what he thinks he is. Just to clarify,
it's a hard pass giving up guys like Burks for salary and value and a first round pick. I don't want to give up that type of haul to have the privilege to pay Collin Sexton. And he's if you're a good player, but not quite there.
Yeah, well, I think he's a good player in the right role. Is he willing to accept that role? Is a valid question. And for everybody who's like, who cares? This team's not going anywhere this year. What does Alec Burks matter? Well, I think a contender out there might be willing to give up a first round pick for Alec Burks. Okay, we've been talking for a long time and we haven't mentioned the news of the day. And that's because the news of the day was pretty fucking meaningless because I don't care about James Dolan lining his pockets, although it's not quite as simple as that. So let me see if I could do this very briefly. The Knicks got in on what was previously a 2-team deal in which the Cavs were acquiring Rajon Rondo from the Lakers for Denzel Valentine because of the Lakers' salary situation, which we don't need to get into. Denzel Valentine would have cost them, as Bobby Marks pointed out on Twitter, effectively $4 million because of luxury tax issues. So they needed a team to take Denzel Valentine off their hands. And the reason why the Knicks were a perfect candidate to take Denzel Valentine off their hands was because the Knicks apparently were, all indications at least would seem to point to the fact that they were planning on waiving Wayne Selden anyway. And how do we know they were planning on waiving Wayne Selden anyway? Because 72 hours from right now, his contract was set to become fully guaranteed. Again, referencing the report from The Athletic, Ryan Arcidiacono is a candidate to stick around for the rest of the year. The only way that could have happened is without Wayne Selden, because Wayne Selden's the 15th man on the roster. So if they're going to waive Selden anyway, might as well pick up what was I reported as $1.1 million for taking on Sexton, for taking a Freudian slip, taking on Valentine, and then immediately waiving Valentine and now having an open roster spot yet again. They also got the draft rights to 2 players who I'm not going to try to pronounce their names, Jeremy. If you would like to try to pronounce their names, you're more than welcome to. And they also gave up in the trade because they had to send something back, the draft rights to 2014 draftee, Louis Laboyer. How'd I do there? Is that
Louis Levier?
Levier?
I can't remember the exact spelling of it, so it's hard for me to pronounce it. I think it's
shout out Phil Jackson. What did he give up for the rights to Louis Levier?
It was the Pacers pick. They got it from the Pacers. I think it was just cash at that time.
Oh, maybe they got it for cash. Okay. Did I miss anything, or is that I basically? The long and the short of it is the Knicks took on Denzel Valentine for about 20 minutes so they could get $1.1 million from the Lakers, so the Lakers could save for about $4 million.
Pretty much, as Bobby Marks tweeted, the Knicks still have to pay Denzel Valentine for another 3 days, so it'll wind up being more of like a net of 1.05 million. The point here,
a cool mill,
right? The Knicks, every team really, there are two allocations. This is to my understanding, where you have cash you can trade and cash you can receive.
This is what I wanted. Yeah.
What the Knicks did this past summer was when they acquired Evan Fournier in a sign and trade, they had to send something out. So what they sent was cash. The minimum amount of cash that you can send out is $1.1 million. So the Knicks got the minimum amount that gets in here. I've been trying to get clarity on how much the Knicks sent for Fournier. But if you're thinking like, okay, well, let's say they sent 1.1 out and they're getting 1.1 back. So it's even, they can just keep going. It's not quite the case to my understanding. It's around $6 million where you have receiving and cash that you send out.
It's
not like you can dip into one or the other.
Yeah. $6 million is the most you could do in any league year.
Just about. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's not one fund where you're operating and it's now a net of zero or whatever. It's like now the Knicks could still use that money to buy a second round pick. And if anything, you would hope as a Knicks fan that that money gets reinvested into the product and doesn't just go into Dolan's pockets. It's more just like, cool, they can take that money, use it, and then it feels like they netted another second round pick that maybe they can use to trade up in this draft or do something differently. That is kind of where you want it to go. It's really a meaningless move in the long run until it means something. What I'm a little surprised about is Louis is 29 years old, I want to say.
Okay.
The Knicks acquired two players, one who's 27 and the other who's 36. So I thought that they would have traded one of their older players that they hold draft rights to. They hold 10 players in total right now. But I would have thought like they hold the rights to Axel Ervel. Maybe because he's 38 years old, they would have traded that instead, right? Because he'll retire and it'll expire and then it's fine. So, you hope that the guy isn't retiring anytime soon. But if he does, then it's
because then they lose the rights to an additional player.
Right. Yeah. And so, But again, it's trivial. The point is they turned what would have been nothing into something minor. We can move on. We can now figure out who is going to slot in. I think if the Knicks, and that's the other thing, I wish that we knew about Kemba Walker's health right now, because if we knew he was unhealthy, then signing Arcidiacono makes a ton of sense, right? If they said Kemba Walker coming back, I could understand the Danuel House angle of it, considering he turned down other teams to come to the Knicks. And, he wasn't great in his 5 minutes of play, but you want, and the one last thing I'll say, ironically enough, there is one player who could have made sense and the Knicks didn't have to do anything. And I won't cry any tears for Argentina, but it's Luka Vildoza. If Vildoza were on the roster, then the whole point guard glut wouldn't really be a problem because they would have the depth they need. It doesn't really matter. They waived him. They'll figure out what they want to do with the 15th spot, which, as I've stated before, I could not care about at all if you wanted me to. But that's the minutia of how
the Kemba part of it is interesting. And I think other than just the perpetual enigma wrapped in a riddle that is Julius Randle, the most interesting thing about this next season moving forward, now that Kemba's health is in question and Derrick Rose is going to be out for somewhere between 4 and 6 more weeks, is like, who do they run out there at point guard? Because it's going to determine how likely it is that they win games. Because for all the obvious reasons, it's a point guards league right now. Okay. Let's move on. So game ball, Andrew has a number of players listed here, or people listed here. Zibanejad? How'd I do?
We'll start with the first name.
Mika?
Nice. Okay. And the second name?
Zibanejad.
Close enough.
He's Italianizing it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Zibanejad?
Say it, Jeremy.
Mika Zibanejad.
Zibanejad. These sound better coming out of your mouth.
It's he's Iranian and Swedish, but he was born in Sweden. So.
Yeah.
Good for him. He's not getting the game ball from me. I'm giving a game.
Hold on. Do you even know what he did for why he's on this list?
Is he one of the players that got back?
No.
Right?
He's a hockey player. He plays for the Rangers.
Thank you.
He had a
I
hat
don't know.
trick yesterday at the game Andrew attended.
Congratulations.
Thankfully, I didn't put Igor Shesterkin on here either, who had a shutout against the defending champion Tampa Bay Lightning, who the Rangers have no problem beating opposed to their counterparts in Long Island or Belmont or wherever the Islanders play now.
I think I can name one NHL player today.
Who?
John Tavares.
Yes. And the only reason you know is because of the outrage when he left, right?
Yeah, I mean, and JB used to talk about is Alexander Ovechkin still in the league?
Yes.
He is.
Okay, so 2. That's it. That's all I know.
Anybody that plays for the Penguins?
Is Jaromir Jagr still active?
No. What's
At
the
least not in the
capital of
NHL.
Australia?
I know Mario Lemieux is not still active.
What's the capital of Australia?
Oh, Sidney Crosby.
Yes.
There you go. Okay,
There you go.
that's great. So 3. It's
Hockey corner here.
hockey corner. I'm gonna give you my game ball to Alec Burks. Did Alec Burks have a better week than Obi Toppin? I don't know, but Alec Burks, I am after this week, I am firmly of the belief at this point that Alec Burks has had the best. Like when I don't know if I'm doing like if we're gonna do or I'll do grades for like the first half of the season. But if you're asking me to pick right now, who has been the best Knick of the first half of the season, it's Alec Burks. And they do not win the Pistons game without him, certainly. You could say that about several other games this year. I know his numbers weren't great in the last 2 games that they played, but there was a sense like, I wrote it today, like he felt like the adult in the room. He always feels like the adult in the room, especially when he's out there with the kids who maybe don't always have it together. I just think we should appreciate what this guy has meant to the team, not only this year, but last year. And the fact that they have him, by the way, right up your alley, Jeremy, Brock Aller. The fact that they got him on a deal that has a team option for the last year, like that could be really, really valuable to certain teams around the league. I'm not saying like Alec Burks is like that amazing, but when you're a team that has trouble signing free agents and you could get a guy who is very clearly a quality role-playing wing. Now, will he still be as high a quality in, I guess, a year and a half from now in like the year 3 of that deal? Maybe not, but like, I think Alec Burks has turned himself into, if nothing else, a nice trade chip. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, he's getting my game ball.
I think he's definitely the number 1 option for players who should get the game ball. I could give it to Mika. The fun thing about the Rangers, I've stayed as far away from Rangers hockey as possible because the Knicks are sliding, the Giants are trash, and the Yankees can't play baseball. So I feel like anything I touch dies. So I'm just letting the Rangers do very well from afar and enjoying the success and not watching the games.
Your service is noted.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Of course. And I will be at the parade if it happens. But until that happens, then I won't be anywhere near there. In terms of another person winning the game ball, I guess I'll go with Obi. 19-6-6 is fun for sure, especially when you play 40 minutes. It's just the sort of thing where I didn't feel a lot of joy when I watched the Knicks. And I know Obi didn't feel a lot of joy based on how he was prioritized. And I think it's the big thing where the Knicks are really desperately missing Derrick Rose more than I think people want to let on.
Yeah.
Not to say that people think he's not being missed, but even with a down last month before the surgery, and maybe that was the reason why his production was down, was because the ankle was bothering him so much that it was a problem. It's hard to see him fly. And it was nice to see him fly a little bit more, even in that Toronto game where you could try to get him moving. I wish that Tibbs ran more for him, quite frankly, but I'd be happy with what we got. And I look forward to many, hopefully more years of him as a Knick. But Burks is the easy number 1 choice. So I think Toppin's the easy number 2.
Yeah. Well said. Detention is going to be a little bit harder. So again, detention. This is actually not detention. This is corporal punishment. Locked in a room with the lights off for a week. Being forced to watch what? What are they being forced to watch while they're in detention? I don't know. That's something we should think of.
Wait, you got to watch stuff in detention?
You don't remember what was that in? Was that in Homecoming? Spider-Man Homecoming.
Okay.
So you're in detention. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking the Breakfast Club where they had Saturday detention.
Oh,
they had to write something out that way.
Well, whatever. I don't know what kind of detention this is, but it's more than the average detention. I don't know if I feel kosher about putting Julius Randle in detention.
But read the reason why.
Well, Julius is physically in detention right now. Like he can't even leave the room.
Probably the best place for him to be, given all of the factors at play. You know what? I don't know. Maybe it's not the week to give it to him, but fuck it. I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to give it to Fournier. Fournier was 1 for 8 from the field against the Thunder.
It's not good.
Yeah, it was really bad. He has, I'm not going to say he hasn't come up big all year. He obviously came up big in the first game of the year, but and he's made important shots and he has contributed to wins in a meaningful way. But there is something about his presence on this team this year that just is he doesn't seem like he wants to be here. And I cannot escape that feeling. So I don't know if it's as much to do with that as anything he did this. And I understand he was their leading scorer against the Raptors. I get that. But did he impact winning in one real cognizable way in that game? No. And I was sitting there watching that game and I'm like, man, this guy was wearing a fucking Team France uniform. So different. It would be so he plays with such piss and vinegar. And it's not fair to expect Olympic level effort when you're playing, but don't be at the opposite end of the spectrum. And I feel like that's kind of what Fournier has brought generally this year. And yeah, so for those and other reasons, I'll give it to Fournier.
I think it's fair. He needed to be the adult in the room, and he was a scorer in the Raptors game, but he didn't do enough with the all around. I think Fournier has been better. I said the stats last week. They certainly didn't go up after this past week, but he's been better than I think people give him credit to be, but he has not been good, and it's totally valid. And I'm curious as to what they will consider with him moving forward, especially because if they still insist on this being Julius Randle's team, this town ain't big enough for the both of them, it seems. So, it's really hard for me to pick a detention. Actually, funny story. I was in detention very briefly today. It's funny, but basically my boss he's awesome. He has one major flaw though, and that is that he is a diehard Hawks fan. And I was in a meeting when the trade dropped. It was a Zoom video call, and I was looking at a side of my screen, and my boss said, "Oh, I know what Jeremy's doing right now. He's on Twitter looking at the Knicks." And I'm like, "How does he know that?" And and he said, "My son programmed it so that I get all the Shams and Woj tweets onto my phone." So I'm like, "Great. All right." That's so he busted my chops on that, which was funny, but
you have a good boss.
I do. But in terms of reality, I see Joe Judge is here, and I think he's certainly worth putting in detention. He's an idiot, and I don't know much about football, and I genuinely believe I could probably get the offense to score 0 to 3 points. And if it's zero, bad. So be it, because it's only 3 fewer points than what the Giants scored this week, or basically ever.
When you're up there trying to convince a room full of people that the culture has turned around and a team that absolutely shits itself week after week after week, that's not generally a good sign. It was very Fizdalian.
Yep. And if the Giants get blown out next week with Jake Fromm, so be it. All right, let's see if there's any fallout from it, because you blamed Jason Garrett, who also was. This is the fun thing about New York sports teams, right? There's not just a problem; there are multiple problems. But I digress. In terms of detention, I'm just going to say the entire team. I'm going to leave out Alec Burks and Obi Toppin. I'm just going to say the entire team. I think you could certainly say Tibbs is leading the charge, but at the same time, Tibbs isn't the one out there. He's coaching the team. He only has so much at his disposal and so much to work with. Still, I thought the way that he managed the game wasn't great. And the game, like specifically the Toronto game, but I thought he blew rotations. I still don't understand why he doesn't utilize Obi's strengths more. I would have quickly in to start again. Like, as I said, I understand having Deuce in there. I get all of that logic. I just think it's whatever. Point being, it's not just Tibbs, it's the entire team. And yet again, they went 2-2, John. They went 2-2, and it feels like they went 0-4.
They did go 2-2. I think Tibbs is doing what he can here.
He is doing what he can.
I will go down with the Tibbs.
Not helping his case.
No, but then again, what coach of a team that had that is coming off of such a feel good season and now has such a feel bad season? Like it's not going to look good. It's never going to look good. It's
also not cause for firing, which is not what we want. You and I, at least. Just
no
things to clean up, and you hope to get better and start winning more games.
That would be a mistake. Okay, so we have arrived at ground zero after 10 weeks, just back where we started with predictions. 5-5, Jeremy. 5-5, me. With the one difference being, you're not coming off the win. Although I think you may have picked. Did you pick first in week one? I did. You did. Okay, so we're literally starting over again now, because you won last week because you took 2-2. I took 3-1. Silly me. This is going to be. I think this is going to be pretty easy for me. The pressure's on you here because there's only 3 games this week. So, and they're tough games. I think they're tough games. So, we'll see. So we have Knicks versus the Pacers. That game is at home tonight as you are listening to this. Then Thursday, our Patreon playback game in which we will be on stage talking about the game as it happens. I'm sure we're going to just be full of champagne and rainbows for that. That's against the Celtics again, Thursday night. And then another game against the Celtics, this one at the Boston Garden or whatever the fuck they call it now. Doesn't matter. On Saturday evening. So 3-game week, Pacers, Celtics. Jeremy, your pick.
Well, before I make my pick, I actually have a very brief announcement. I won't be in the city this week after all. So I do have 2 tickets to the Pacers game. Really not looking for much. Don't want to sell them online because I don't want any Indiana fans to snatch them up. So if you are interested, I'm really not asking for much. As I just said, go ahead and name your price, hit my DMs. Also have tickets to the Mavericks game the following week. 2 of them. Just feel like I should plug that too. I think it's $210 for the, it's $209 for the Pacers game. They're my season tickets. I think they're pretty solid. And I think it's $210 for the Mavericks game. That one be a little bit more expensive. Regardless, if you're interested, let me know. Let's make a deal. Okay.
Let's make a deal.
Moving on.
Great game show.
In terms of this week, I agree. I think the pressure is more on me than it is on you because of the fact, the competition and everything. Considering how we are going into this, not knowing the status of Julius Randle and everything that we've seen,
I know what you're going to do.
I'm inclined to go with 1 and 2.
You're a motherfucker. Okay. It's funny, as you were repeating back what I said about the pressure's on you, I'm like, no, it isn't. He's going to take 1 and 2. And then I'm going to be forced to pick 0 and 3 or 2 and 1.
Did you think I was going to pick 2 and 1?
I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking. Not the first time. Won't be the last. Oh, God. They're going to win 2 of these fucking games? Jesus Christ. Has any one of us picked an 0 for a week at any point in time this season?
I think the closest we came to that was me thinking that the Knicks could go 3-0, and they went 2-1.
Wait, nobody's picked a winless week.
No,
right?
No. I mean, listen, the Celtics nearly lost to the Magic at home, and I know the Knicks lost to the Magic at home.
I know,
but
Magic without Cole Anthony.
Yes,
at least Cole was there for both of the Knicks losses. Yeah, it took 50 from Jaylen Brown to overcome that. The Celtics, I mean, I do think the Celtics, I've been watching not a lot of Celtics, but I find myself tuning to them for whatever reason. God.
I think 3-0 is a very plausible.
That's great.
Option.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I wouldn't take it because I already took 1 and 2, but if I had to, I would consider it.
That's great. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. What do you want me to tell you? I don't have a lot of confidence in this team right now. I'm going to take 0-3.
So let's say you're right. It is 0-3. And the Knicks sit at 17-23.
Holy fuck. We could do this real quickly before Producer's Corner. So I'm like going to my phone to pull this up. Meanwhile, I have a fucking laptop that I'm looking into. So the Knicks right now are in 11th place. They are, are they tied? Yeah, they're tied record wise, or at least games back with the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are fully healthy. And they're also the second best offense in basketball. So it's like we talk a lot about on the show is like, well, what's your calling card? Like, what are you as an NBA team? Like the Hawks know what they are as an NBA team. Their team scores a fuckload of points and they try to stop people when possible. They haven't much this year, but they probably will be able to. That's the team the Knicks are currently tied with in 11th place. The Pacers are 3 games back of the Knicks. So that means if the Knicks do go 0-3, at best, the Pacers, if they go 3-0, will tie the Knicks, right? That said, the Pacers do have a positive scoring margin. They have still scored more points than their opponents this year, despite the fact that they are 9 games under 500. That's talk about a tough trick to pull off.
Well, they're also so many close games.
I know.
That is why they're underwater.
Even the other night, I think last night they lost by like 6 to the Cavs. They're 3-7 in this is the Pacers. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. They've lost 4 in a row. I think what we're really, the Pacers don't matter. I think what we're basically asking is if the Knicks went 0-3 this week with, again, some tough games on the schedule before tough doesn't begin to describe the next stretch of games. That is a hellacious stretch of games. Does the front office maybe start to, I don't know. What do you want to say? Think differently about things? I mean, you could only convince yourself of so much for so long, right? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to see them go 0-3. I want to see you be wrong and me be wrong and then go 2-1 or 3-0.
Well, I'd still be right because I have the benefit of the doubt.
Great. That's good for you.
It is.
But I don't know. We've said the seasons was at we've said the season has been at a crossroads before. It feels like it's really at a crossroads now. So we'll see what this team is made of. And on that note, Andrew Claudio, what do we got to finish up?
So we have 2 things. The first is a bit of a show announcement that I will include you guys in and kind of ask you, John, to lead the charge. But a year ago, this upcoming Sunday, I think it is a full year that we have been with the Blue Wire Podcast Network and all the different ads that you've heard and different opportunities and guests that we've had on from the rest of the network. We've been happy about our time with Blue Wire, and it's why we are here to officially announce that we have signed a 2-year extension with the network to be one of their 2 Knicks podcasts. Obviously our friends over at Knicks Fan TV are part of this as well. But I'll speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure I can speak for both of us or all 3 of us that we're satisfied. We love the partnership, Tyler and Andrew and obviously Kevin over there at Blue Wire, and we're excited to be part of the Blue Wire family for the next 2 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have much more to add other than the fact that it is cool when you're doing stuff that you're proud of and you're happy about and you're excited about, to be with a group of people who are not only equally as excited about what you're doing, but who also are putting forth a lot of other content that is equally exciting and high quality. So for anybody out there who's listening that likes our show, check out Blue Wire's other stuff. They have a ton of really great pods, NBA pods, as obviously you've heard guests on this show who come from other Blue Wire podcasts, but they have pods about all kinds of stuff, including even movie podcasts. I'll always get a shameless plug in for final review somewhere before we get done with the episode.
It is appreciated. Jeremy, I will say the thing that I thought is cool recently is like playback is a thing that we're allowed to do or able to do because Blue Wire goes to us. We're one of their high priority pods, and we get the Prize Picks offer if we want to take advantage of that. We get the Manscaped ad that you all love to keep referencing to me because that's the week John lost his voice, and I got to tell everybody what you can do with Manscaped. And I appreciate all these opportunities, but like you're going to be a little bit more involved this year with the Blue Wire process. So I figured if you wanted to say anything, you can.
You guys said quite a bit, not much more I feel is necessary to add, but it's been an honor and a privilege with you gents and with Blue Wire. And it's going to be a fun 2 years and then hopefully more after that.
I think that's the key part here is now we're in a long-term contract, guys. We're no longer in a contract year. We're signed long-term, and there's no.
Will we bring the effort?
Exactly.
I'm gonna channel my inner Julius Randle after this. Just
oh no,
man. Don't expect me to get back in transition.
Yeah. Hey, what's this salary cap thing? Give a shit about a salary cap. I don't care. I'm just
cap or no cap or.
No cap. There's
no cap. Whatever. No need. The plan. Whatever. The whatever you want plan.
Yeah.
And then speaking of final review, two things on behalf of Oz and I. Thank you to the Knicks Film School audience that has really supported us and us trying to build something. And as we go into 2022, I just want to give a quick plug that we have a New Year's resolution and a goal that we're trying to get to 200 reviews on iTunes. And full disclosure, it's because that's the threshold you have to meet in order to become eligible for certification on Rotten Tomatoes. So head on over to Final Review on iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. In fact, just drop a review. I'm not even sure if it has to be 5 stars, but because you like me, please go give a 5-star rating and a review. And it's well on our way to hopefully some big things happening from us coming soon. And then one thing we're going to do, I think, at the end of episodes that people liked last week when we talked about Spider-Man, I want to get your guys' opinion on a movie. And over the holiday break, a movie from Adam McKay and Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence called Don't Look Up hit Netflix. And I know you both have seen it. Enough time has come for people to have seen it on Netflix if they wanted to. If you haven't, this is the end of the show for you. We'll see you next week. John and Jeremy, full spoilers, your thoughts on Don't Look Up.
I'll be brief, and then I'll turn it to Jeremy because we kind of talked about this a little bit on the Patreon pod. I liked it. I enjoyed my time watching the movie. I felt like the comedy probably lands better for some people than others. I think it depends on what type of a person you are. For me, like obviously it's poking fun at our present reality, and I am more saddened by our present reality, and like a lot of the jokes that the jokes, not that they didn't land, but it's like, okay, I get why that's supposed to be funny, but not that I couldn't even bring myself to laugh. It's just like, it didn't prompt a laugh from me, even though, again, it's very clear what they're trying to do, and what they're doing is very smart. I want to be very clear about that. Also, I thought the performances were excellent, as we discussed. I'll let Jeremy vamp on Mark Rylance, but Leo, last living movie star. I'll just end it there.
I loved it. I was hooked from the very beginning. It feels like a lot of movies, you need some time to really get into it. And this was like, oh, look, we're seeing that something is headed towards Earth. And just right from the get-go. And the cuts that they made, the humor, like the fact that Jennifer Lawrence's character could not let go of the fact that they were charged money for free snacks.
Yeah.
Like just the running gag of that.
That was good. That was good. Yeah.
The fact that no one knows what a Bronterak is. And then you find out at the end what a Bronterak is. The irony of like Jonah Hill's character living through hell and then like live streaming to a world that really doesn't exist with no signal or anything, and him having to kind of cope on his own. It feels very much of a reap what you sow movie. And I didn't feel like I was being preached to, because even though I agree with the philosophies that were being discussed, it was still like, the stakes are comparable to real life. And these are things that I think about on a daily basis. And it's very concerning. And it's nice to have something that you could call it propaganda, and I think you'd be very wrong. It is objectively a fact of what is going on in this world. So it was nice to kind of see that and laugh at it, but also have the reality sink in a different kind of way. And ultimately, I'd want to go the way that the lead characters went. If there is, some sort of situation like that, hopefully there isn't, but we're running out of time. And it was nice to see something that said, no, there are reasons to care. This is why. This is what's at stake. I felt like it was suspending belief at the same time of not doing it at all. So,
yeah, and I just one thing I forgot. Very quick shout to. I'm not saying it was like the best performance of the movie, but the most like this could absolutely be a real person in terms of the way they are and the way they're like literally everything about what they do. The Tyler Perry talk show host,
yep.
Like that's like that could be that literally could be a person in the way they go about and like word for word.
The getting serious news, like the comet is coming and him saying, can it hit my ex-wife's house? Yeah. It's this place in New Jersey. If it's at all possible. With the it's yeah.
Again, he's not going to be nominated for any awards, but like, talk about spot on, spot fucking on.
And I do love Mark Rylance, as John said.
Mm-hmm.
I've been fortunate to see him on stage. He's phenomenal. Just everything he does, but like the ability to mimic a multi-billionaire who decides to privatize, an asteroid that basically will wipe out all of civilization as far as we know it, and not care about the greater good to even any extent. It was like, yeah, no, that feels dangerously realistic, and I hate everything about it, but he did just such a good job of it that it was like, this just feels believable.
Also, sorry, Andrew.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the woman on the fake commercial that Leo's on, where she's like talking about what
I'm pro comment. It will bring us jobs.
No, but the way she says, I was talking to my friends about what the comic could do for me. It's that. See, I think it's gonna be a better movie on rewatch. I haven't gotten around to the rewatch yet.
It reminded me of every single commercial we've gotten during Knicks games that it's like, go get the vaccine, and they're trying to create like this like everyday scenario that this comes up in everyday conversation.
Go
ahead, Jeremy.
It rings true to a commercial we haven't seen in a while, but now hits even harder, which is the off-road commercial where it's like, there's no road, zero road. Well, I guess I'll have to find my own path. It's like, there is no path because the world is anyway.
So two things. One, the Rylance character being the way it is, this movie has become a bit divisive because it's a little one way. I think collectively, the influence of billionaires on political decisions is a frustration by everybody on every side, which is why his character, I think, actually is the most important in the movie, to make it more of a general commentary than just a one-sided, hits all at this point. Agree. And so Oz and I got to see it early, and it happened before Omicron surge. I think it might have just been announced that Omicron was like a thing. And so we saw it before any of the this wave that we've had. Also, before I've had the last 2 weeks that I've had, for those that have asked and reached out, my dad is still dealing with the effects of COVID, and he's not getting worse. He's just still has no taste. He experiences fatigue, has no appetite, has lost 17 pounds. Like, this is not a thing that I recommend to anybody, that I wish on anybody. And I did not, when I saw the movie the first time, have the overall frustration that I have now, that like we're still in this. And you can hear the lyrics of the Ariana Grande song, like, get your heads out of your ass and pay attention to the qualified goddamn scientists, as like the thesis of the movie. And yet here we still are dealing with this, because there is a lot of agendas at play, which is where the movie works even more so, even if it is just all of us being frustrated at once, that this is like, there was a path out and people in charge did not make the correct decisions to get us out. And it's where it's on the nose, but so is Dr. Strangelove. And that movie is beloved by all.
That was a good call when you called back to that as a movie that has aged very well. That had a
when you say you mean, so Oz, I will credit Oz is the one that referenced that. I think I referenced Spinal Tap as my like on the nose satirical play. They're both good.
Exactly.
So everybody,
just really quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew, you're saying how it only feels like it goes one way. It's like, well, there's only one way we are going based on how things are presenting themselves. And it's like, again, this is going to be on YouTube, and I'm sure that someone's going to comment about liberal bias and all, and it's just like, it's infuriating because of the fact that it shouldn't be political. It should just be nonpartisan. There's a problem. We got to fix it.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel
it
like
is political, Jeremy. Don't look up. Just don't look up.
That's the even better part. The actual title of the movie, when you realize why it's called Don't Look Up.
It's pretty great. And frightening.
Yeah.
Okay. That was good. A good way to end it. This was fun and therapeutic as always. That's what these episodes are turning into, free therapy sessions, hopefully for our listeners as well. Jeremy Cohen, thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.
And Andrew Claudio, thank you, sir.
Fuck Tom Brady.
And everybody out there, thank you for checking out another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We will be back with another episode in a couple days this week. In between, you will have, of course, a post game after the Pacers game, which I hope they win that and make my prediction wrong this week. Until then, we will talk to you soon. Peace out.